broke alone. And he knew exactly what I needed. They say desperation makes you do things you never thought you'd even consider. But no one tells you how quietly it creeps in, how it doesn't arrive with a bang, but with silence. Silence from the job you lost. Silence from the husband who no longer touches you. Silence from the bank account that echoes with every declined purchase. That was my life, and I was running out of excuses and out of time. My name's Emma. A few months ago, I was a wife, a working professional, a woman with plans. Now I was just a number on a lease, a tenant about to be evicted, a face Daniel, my husband, barely looked at anymore. Our apartment, once filled with laughter and clinking wine glasses, had become a pressure cooker of blame, shame, and quiet resentment. I hadn't just lost my income, I'd lost the feeling of being wanted, of being seen. And then there was Mr. Carter. He was my landlord, powerful, commanding. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. His eyes could strip you bare, even if he didn't move a muscle. I had never thought about him outside of our rent checks and hallway greetings. But desperation, it reshapes your boundaries, redraws the map of what you once thought was unthinkable. When I knocked on his door that day, it wasn't courage, it was survival. We were days from being kicked out. I told myself I'd ask for an extension. I rehearsed the words, but when he opened the door and gave me that look, everything changed. "I was wondering when you'd come," he said. That one line. Smooth, calculated, like he already knew what I hadn't yet admitted to myself. And what followed wasn't just a conversation, it was a test, one that would push me to the very edge of my dignity. What he offered me wasn't just a roof, it was control, a choice. And even though I told myself I would never take it, never sink, that low part of me stayed in that room, even after I walked away. Because deep down, I had considered it, and that terrified me. After that encounter with Mr. Carter, I told myself I could put it behind me, that I still had time, that I would find another way. But that was a lie I desperately needed to believe. The truth was, I had run out of lifelines. I hadn't just knocked on his door for an extension, I had gone there hoping for a miracle. And what he offered wasn't a miracle, it was a transaction. But it lingered. His words, his presence, the way he had looked at me. I walked home that afternoon in a fog, the city noises around me muffled. I didn't even realize I'd been crying until I stepped into our apartment and felt the tear streaks cooling my cheeks. I wiped them away quickly. Daniel couldn't see me like this, not again. The apartment was quiet, and I was grateful. Lately, silence between us was better than the cold words we'd been exchanging. I tried to distract myself. I opened my laptop and refreshed my email inbox, hoping, praying for some response to the 27 applications I'd sent out that week. Nothing, not even a rejection, just the digital void. That night, Daniel came home late again. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled, and he smelled faintly of perfume, floral, unfamiliar. He kissed my cheek absently, like he was greeting a roommate, not a wife. I wanted to ask where he'd been, but I already knew the answer wouldn't matter. He wasn't here anymore, not really. I tried to talk to him over dinner. I spoke with Mr. Carter. I said quietly, eyes fixed on the pasta I could barely afford to make. Daniel didn't look up. "About what, the rent?" I asked for more time. "Did he give it?" "No," I whispered. Daniel shrugged. "Then we're screwed." That was it. No follow-up, no concern, no plan, just a shrug. I stared at him, trying to find the man I married, the man who used to fight for us. But he was gone, buried somewhere under the weight of his own resentment and exhaustion. The next morning, I stood in the shower longer than usual. I let the water scald my skin, hoping it would burn away the growing darkness inside me, but it didn't. I was still me when I stepped out. Emma broke, unwanted and running out of time. I dressed in my nicest blouse and jeans and headed to another interview, my third that week. I took the bus to a small marketing firm downtown, clinging to hope like it was the last shred of myself, but they barely looked at my resume. "We're looking for someone with more recent experience," the woman said, without even shaking my hand. I walked out of the building and sat on the curb. My bank account had $11.43 in it. We were 2 days from eviction. I couldn't borrow money. I had no family I could ask. My friends had long stopped checking in. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Don't wait up. No explanation, no apology, just distance." And then, like muscle memory, my finger hovered over Mr. Carter's contact. I didn't press it. Not yet. But the temptation was becoming harder to resist. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster, trying to drown out the whisper in my head. "You need help. I can provide it. No strings attached." What does that even mean? There are always strings. Always. The next morning, the final eviction notice slid under the door. No more warnings. We had 48 hours. I broke. I stood in the kitchen, hands trembling, the paper shaking in my grip. I tried to imagine packing our things, telling Daniel finding somewhere else to stay, but the truth was, there was nowhere else. I picked up my phone again, my thumb hovered, my breath caught in my throat, and I called. The phone barely rang before he answered. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth like he had just been waiting. "I need help," I said. There was a pause. Of course, no details, no small talk, just understanding. He gave me a time, a location, his private suite in the building he owned. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just said yes, because in that moment it felt like the only choice I had left. The day I agreed to meet Mr. Carter again felt surreal. It was a quiet Sunday, the city unusually still. I walked slowly through the halls of his high-rise building, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out every footstep. My fingers were cold despite the heat, and as I reached his door, I paused, questioning everything. My reflection in the polished glass looked like a stranger, nervous, hardened, tired. The door opened before I knocked. He had been expecting me. "Emma," he said with that same unreadable tone, half curiosity, half control. "Come in." His apartment was sleek and modern, the kind of place that reeked of wealth without needing to prove it. Large windows looked over the city skyline, and everything inside glistened like it had never been touched by hardship. It was the opposite of my life. He didn't try to charm me, he didn't pretend this was anything more than what it was. And in a way, I appreciated that. There were no false pretenses, no romance, no lies, just an agreement. A fair exchange, he had called it. A transaction where desperation was the currency. I was silent throughout. I didn't ask questions. I didn't cry. I went through the motions, floating above my own body, watching everything from somewhere far away. When it was over, I dressed quickly, my hands shaking only slightly. He handed me an envelope. I didn't open it. I just took it, nodded, and left. I made it back home before Daniel. I showered again, scrubbing my skin until it was raw, but no amount of soap could clean what I felt. I looked in the mirror, barely recognizing the eyes staring back at me. There was no triumph, no relief, just guilt, thick and heavy. The money was more than enough to cover rent and bills. I even bought groceries. The fridge hadn't been that full in weeks. Daniel noticed, of course. "Did your parents help?" he asked casually, peering inside. "No," I said. "I found a way." He didn't press. He never pressed. He just accepted the answer like everything else he had stopped caring about. And yet something changed. He started watching me more closely, like he could sense that something had shifted, even if he couldn't name it. I tried to act normal. I cooked dinner. I smiled when he came home. I even asked about his day. But the words felt hollow, and the distance between us only grew. It didn't take long before I did it again. Not because I wanted to, not because I liked it, but because it worked. And when you're drowning, anything that keeps your head above water becomes a lifeline, even if it's made of barbed wire. I told myself it was still survival, just until I could get back on my feet, just until a job came through, just until things got better, but just until has a way of becoming forever. The more I saw Mr. Carter, the more detached I became. He never asked about Daniel, never asked about my life. He just provided. And I delivered what he expected in return. I began to hate myself in new ways, quietly, secretly. And yet a part of me grew numb. The shame became easier to hide. I started to compartmentalize, splitting myself into two women, the one who greeted her husband with a forced smile and the one who disappeared into Mr. Carter's world. Then one night, everything changed. Daniel came home earlier than usual. I hadn't expected him. I was still in the shower, having just come back from Mr. Carter's. I heard the front door open and close his footsteps down the hall, and then the bathroom door creaked. He didn't say anything, just stood there, looking at me through the mirror. "I thought you worked late tonight," I said quickly, trying to sound casual, even though I could barely breathe. "I forgot my wallet," he said flatly. He studied me for a moment longer. I avoided his eyes. After a long silence, he finally said, "You smell different." It wasn't an accusation, not directly, but it cut deep. He turned and walked out before I could respond. That night, we barely spoke. We lay in bed, backs turned, breathing out of sync. And then came the message. A few days later, Daniel left his phone on the counter. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even trying to look. The screen lit up while I was cooking. "Last night was amazing." "When can I see you again?" I froze. My breath caught in my throat as I read the name Lena. I didn't know her. I didn't want to know her. The betrayal should have destroyed me. But all I felt was emptiness. Because I had no right to be angry. I had no moral high ground left. I had done worse, hadn't I? But knowing that didn't dull the pain. We were broken. Completely. That night I waited until he came home, and I confronted him. Calmly. Quietly. "Who is she?" His eyes widened. He didn't deny it. Didn't even try. "I didn't plan it," he said. "It just happened." The words I had used in my own head. I laughed bitter and hollow. "Me too." His face went pale. "What, I've been seeing someone too," I said, staring him down. "With who, Mr. Carter?" His hands clenched, his jaw locked. "You're lying." I shook my head. "I'm not. We fought." Words were said that couldn't be taken back. Things that cut deeper than silence ever could. "You sold yourself," he spat. I didn't cry. I did what I had to do to keep us afloat, and I did what I had to do to feel like I mattered again. There it was, the ugly truth. Neither of us had been blameless. We had both drowned and clawed at whatever we could to stay afloat, even if it meant dragging each other under. Daniel left 3 days later. No dramatic goodbye, just a suitcase and a final look that said everything, and I let him go. Because sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes it dies quietly, rotted from the inside out. The days that followed were a blur. The apartment felt colder, emptier. But in the silence I began to reflect, not just on him, but on myself. I wasn't proud of what I had done, but I also refused to keep punishing myself. This wasn't about Mr. Carter anymore, or Daniel. This was about me. What I would choose to become now that there was nothing left to hide behind. The morning after Daniel left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty coffee mug in my hand, like it might somehow offer answers. The apartment was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. No rustling of papers, no clinking of spoons, no footsteps rushing to beat the morning traffic. Just silence. And within it, my thoughts, raw and relentless. I had told myself I did what I had to do. I had justified, rationalized, compartmentalized. But now there was no one left to lie, to no husband to convince, no landlord to appease. Just me sitting in the ruins of every decision I had made. The irony was cruel. I had sacrificed my dignity to save a relationship that was already over. Daniel's body had stayed, but his soul had checked out long before Mr. Carter entered the picture. Maybe I had known that. Maybe that's why I had convinced myself it didn't matter. But it did. Because betrayal isn't always about the act, it's about the moment you stop choosing the person you once vowed to never hurt. And both Daniel and I had stopped choosing each other a long time ago. That realization didn't bring peace, just clarity. And clarity demanded action. I took the envelope Mr. Carter had given me, the second one, the one I hadn't touched, and I walked back to his office that afternoon. The air was heavy, the sky threatening rain, and it matched my mood perfectly. My palms were sweating as I climbed the steps, but my stride was steady. I knocked once. He opened the door, his smile smug, like he knew I'd be back. "Emma," he said, leaning against the frame. "I was wondering when I'd see you again. I'm not here for what you think I said holding out the envelope. I came to return this." He blinked, surprised. "Excuse me, I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you. Whatever arrangement we had, it's done." His smile faded. "You realize I don't do refunds. I don't want one." He studied me for a moment, searching my face for weakness, for hesitation, but he found none. His voice was lower now, more serious. "You think walking away makes you better than what you did?" "No," I said. "It just means I'm not going to keep being the person who made that decision." He scoffed and leaned back. "You'll be back." Desperation always comes back. Not this time. And with that, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't run. I just left. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight start to lift. But the climb out of that hole wasn't easy. The money I had saved from before was barely enough to hold me over. I found a part-time job waiting tables at a diner on the edge of the city. It wasn't glamorous. It barely paid enough to cover groceries. But it was honest. And I needed honesty like I needed air. I stopped checking Daniel's social media. I deleted the photos from my phone, not out of bitterness, but because I couldn't move forward while staring at the past. I knew he wasn't coming back, and I was finally okay with that. In the evenings, I came home to an apartment that felt colder than before, but it was mine. No more pretending, no more hiding, just me and the silence. And in that silence, I began to heal. One afternoon after my shift, a woman at the diner sat alone crying over a coffee. Her mascara streaked down her face. Something about her posture, the way she kept her arms crossed tightly like she was holding herself together, reminded me of me. "Rough day?" I asked gently as I refilled her cup. She nodded. I didn't think it would ever get this bad." I sat across from her for a moment. "It gets better," I said, "but first it gets honest." She looked up at me like I had just spoken the only truth she'd heard in weeks. That night, as I walked home in the fading light, I thought about how far I had come, not in distance, not even in success, but in truth. I was still poor, still struggling, still alone, but I was no longer ashamed, because I was surviving the right way now without compromising who I was. And then something unexpected happened. I received a call from a small publishing house I had applied to months ago. They had reviewed my resume and wanted to schedule an interview for an editorial assistant role. My hands shook as I ended the call. Not because it was a guaranteed job, not because it would fix everything, but because it was hope, real hope. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I borrowed a blazer from a friend at the diner, printed my resume at the library, and practiced answering questions in the mirror. The day of the interview, I stood outside the building for a long time, breathing in the moment. This wasn't redemption. This wasn't justice. But it was something better, a new beginning. The interview went well. The woman interviewing me, Maya, was kind but sharp. She asked about my employment gap, and I told her the truth, but not all of it, just enough to be honest without bleeding. "I went through a hard time," I said. "I made some decisions I'm not proud of, but I've learned from them and I'm ready to start again." She nodded. "That's all anyone can do." When I got the call offering me the position 2 days later, I cried. Not because of the job, but because someone had seen worth in me when I had almost forgotten it existed. The first day at work was terrifying and wonderful. I was surrounded by people who had no idea who I was or what I had done. I was just Emma, the new assistant. And for the first time, that was enough. I found a rhythm. I woke up early, brewed my own coffee, and packed lunch to save money. I worked long hours, took notes, read manuscripts, and slowly started to remember who I had been before everything fell apart. I even started writing again. Nothing fancy, just journal entries, reflections, pages filled with thoughts I had buried for too long. And in those pages, I found pieces of myself I thought I had lost. Weeks turned into months. The apartment no longer felt empty. It felt earned. I bumped into Daniel once at a grocery store. He looked older, more tired. We exchanged polite nods. No words. And that was enough. There was nothing left to say. Mr. Carter tried to call once. I blocked his number. Because survival is not the same as selling yourself short. And I had learned painfully that my worth was never tied to the help I accepted, but to the boundaries I chose to protect. Looking back, I used to think survival meant doing whatever it took no matter the cost. That when you're drowning, you don't ask where the rope came from, you just grab it. But now I know better. Survival without self-respect isn't living. It's just slowly disappearing from yourself. What I did with Mr. Carter didn't make me evil. It made me human, flawed, scared, desperate. I don't hate that version of me anymore. I understand her, but I don't want to be her again. The real turning point wasn't the moment I walked into his office or the night I gave in. It was the day I walked away for good. Not just from him or from Daniel, but from the lie I'd told myself that I wasn't enough on my own. Because I am, and if you're watching this, maybe you need to hear that too. You are enough, even if you're broke, even if you're lost, even if you've made mistakes that still sting when you think about them in the middle of the night. You don't need to sell your soul to survive. You don't need to sacrifice your dignity to feel safe. You just need to keep going one hard day, one brave decision at a time. Now I have less than I used to. No husband, no financial cushion, no picture-perfect life, but I have more than I ever did. I have peace, I have clarity, and most of all, I have myself back. And that's everything. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between your values and survival? Would you have made the same decision I did? Let's talk about it in the comments. No judgment, just real stories. If this story moved you in any way, please like the video. It helps more people see it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true, raw, and powerful life stories that don't shy away from the truth. Share this with someone who feels like they're at rock bottom. Sometimes a story like this is the rope they need, but the kind that reminds them they still have power. Because at the end of the day, we are not our worst decisions, we are how we rise after them. Thank you for watching.